I didn't even have time to worry about setting up our little mash as I looked over towards the castle and saw that behemoth of a creature coming down. All I saw was really a shadow, backed by the morning sun, as it descended towards the girls. I wanted to scream, I wanted to yell for them to look out, but they seriously knew what was going on, as I saw all three of them bank away as hard as they could, already trying to dodge all sorts of whatever in the hell type of ballistic weapons were coming up from the castle itself, but trying to bank away as fast as their wings would allow them. The little angel lady, which I still forget her name off the top of my head, was able to use her wind magic to go a whole lot faster. My two little dragon girls were able to easily make heat go into their wings, which made them go a little faster, but tended to make them raise in altitude a little faster than they wanted. However, it was enough. They were able to get away as the dragon descended and landed, flapping its wings, slowing down just enough that the wind I could feel over where I was pushed many of the soldiers over. Most of those holding shields were catching the brunt of it and immediately fell onto their backs. The dragon that had landed on the castle wall looked down at us and then looked into the castle itself. It almost looked confused for a moment, although I couldn't really see its face too well from the distance I was at. Immediately, I wanted to run in. I wanted to do something, but I didn't have time. It simply roared, but not roaring towards our forces, but roared into the castle. What? I thought it was on their side. But then it turned and roared at our own folks. I worried for the folks under my care. I didn't want them to get hurt, not caught up. We've gone this far, even though we're doing much more than we were supposed to do. The dragon still just seemed to scream out. And then I saw something surprising. Renesia and Terzak both went over towards the dragon and started flying around its head. I got a good look at perception, and they were both approximately the size of its skull, even for young ladies. But I'm also accounting for the width of their wings and the length all the way to their tails, so my perception might be a little off. And yet they started screaming something I couldn't hear. It was very odd. But then no one had time. As several different ballistic weapons started to fire on either side, the dragon itself seemed to stagger and fall over towards our own forces. The body itself fell on the far side, over towards us. We couldn't believe what was happening. Suddenly, this monstrous creature was embedded with our own forces. What the hell was going on? Something's just off. What is going on here? With that, the dragon tried to get up on his feet, but our own forces charged in and started hitting it with all sorts of ballistic weapons. The scorpions were hastily set up and launched bolts in its direction, strong enough to pierce its hide, but not very deep. The catapults and trebuchets would take a while before they were set up, but I looked on in horror as many bladed weapons went at its legs, its tail, its wings. It raised up, trying to thrash around, trying to stay away. And then I saw something I hoped I wouldn't see. This thing started to spark with lightning. Oh shit. Before I even had a chance to even realize what was going on, it began to well up a bunch of heat into its mouth and spurt out a seemingly endless supply of flame across the front line. Oh shit. Thankfully for most, the shield wall was able to take the brunt of the hit, and the shields themselves were able to take the hits, though since they were mostly made of wood, they immediately had to discard the shields as soon as possible. With the shield wall down, many of the formations simply broke. And with this, we believed that the assault on the castle was pretty much over. But then the dragon turned, raised its wings, flapped, raising higher and higher and higher, as I saw Trezek trying to get close to it for some reason. I couldn't figure out why. And yet it turned towards the castle, and then something hit it, and again it stumbled, it staggered. I thought it would fall back on our own formations, and then it simply fired another blast of heat along the edge of the turrets itself. The ramparts were completely toasted, and there were all sorts of screaming coming from inside the castle. But with that, something else hit the dragon, and it fell down and landed with a very hard thud. With that, I could hear orders being screamed, but I couldn't see what was going on. I ended up being too busy as another one had called me out. It was Hana. She had told me that they needed to set up the medical tent so that we could take care of all the wounded as they were going to come in droves now. I didn't have time to worry about this. The last thing I saw about the dragon before I looked away was the fact that they were throwing ropes on it, trying to hold it down. Are they trying to capture this thing? What the hell were they thinking? Seriously, what the hell are they thinking? As we got the tent set up and finally got the tables, we got the first round of wounded that came in. Most of which were burns and a few of the arrows were coming through, but nothing too severe at this point. Most everyone had hid behind the shield walls. I asked them if the shield walls held. They said, yeah, but there isn't any shields anymore. Oh, that's to be expected. With that, I worried about what was going to come next, but I didn't have time to worry about it. As myself and Hana worked as best we could trying to save as many, she had to tell others by using her hypnosis to make sure they didn't feel the pain. She knew this would only last for so long, as the brain itself, the mind, the consciousness would fight her hypnosis. It always would. Nothing wants to be caged. If it does want to be caged, something's seriously wrong with them. But that's a whole nother conversation I had no time for, as I was desperately trying to get lacerations and perforations completely sealed. I grabbed another soldier down, grabbed the bolt that had been stuck into his torso and ripped it out. As he screamed, Hana whipped her tail around and locked him down towards the table as I proceeded to heal him up. My magic was starting to wane. I was so tired. We hadn't had time to rest between the two battles. First, we had taken down the majority of the forces that had gone toe-to-toe with us in the field, and now we got to take down a castle? What psycho retard son of a bitch thought this was a good idea? Apparently someone who doesn't care about the health and welfare of their people, that's for sure. Apparently my whole thing when I quoted Sun Tzu went right over their heads. Like Peanut would say, "Meow." But again, I didn't have time to think about it. More and more of the wounded were being brought in. Now it was Keen and Sarah were bringing them in via teleportation. And I knew that they were just whipping through all of their points as fast as possible. And I know having to jump with more than your own body weight is extremely difficult for them. They've told it to me on many occasions. Yet they still did it. After about a half a dozen, I saw Xena was just about ready to pass out. I told her to stop, get a drink or something. She needed to rest, because if she jumped and she wasn't ready, she was going to end up jumping into something. Quite literally halfway into something, and the last thing I need to do is try to transmute her out of a tree. She didn't understand what I was talking about. Look, do you want to be part wood? You want wood on your legs? She grinned and kind of laughed at this. I said, "Now's not the time, you Kasune bitch. Ugh. Just sit down." Weird things always happen on the battlefield. No matter where you've been. No matter what battlefield. Weird shit always happens. And this just happened to be one of those situations. As the battle continued on, I had a short break as I looked out and I saw ladders up against the side of the castle itself. It looks like they were trying to breach in through the area where the dragon had set the ramparts on fire. Not a smart idea to run into the flames, especially when you're going to be flanked on both sides. But hey, who am I to say this is smart? I worried what was going to happen next because I saw that bodies were beginning to fall. I knew several of them wouldn't even make it to me. They were going to be done. But what could I do? I could only be here. I could only save who I can. And with that, I saw the other healers. Many of them had already run out of energy, but they were starting to patch people up using the first aid techniques I showed them. Many of them overusing tourniquets, but we can revive a limb later. It's not something we have to worry about at this point. But I worried too much. Too much. They were losing too much blood. Many of those getting to me were just covered in it. Myself, my whole front side was up to my neck in blood. Some of the blood squirting out and spraying across my face before I was able to even cinch up one of their arteries. Many of them, I just couldn't save. It just wasn't going to happen. On the battlefield, they continued to push up onto the ramparts themselves and then continued to move out. They had made a foothold and they had somehow been able to hold the dragon down, but they were only able to take up that small part of the wall, maybe 300 feet in either direction, up to a line of turrets. After that, it was basically just a wall of arrows would come through that doorway every time someone tried to push through. They wanted to bring up their shields. Unfortunately, most of them were simply cooked. They only had maybe 10% of them left, and they had to bring them up, one by one. It wasn't easy to climb a ladder with a shield in your hand, especially something based off of ancient Rome. Those things are very large. Not the heaviest things in the world, but extremely cumbersome and very easy to slip off of, especially the way they built their ladders. Regardless of that, eventually I knew the battle would continue the next day, but I needed a break. With the lull in battle, the wounded finally stopped coming through. Those that had any healing abilities left were able to work their magic by keeping everyone alive. I had revived someone's arm that they had tourniquet on for over 6 hours. Damn thing was pretty much starting to turn black, but I was able to save it. He was grateful, though he had no interest in heading back to the front line. Me? Couldn't sleep. I just couldn't sleep. With everything I had seen, everything I had heard, it just wasn't going to happen. Everything in my mind was going 50 million miles an hour, so I simply made my way down towards the front line to see what else I could do, grabbing an extra group of medical tools and a couple of the medics, most of which were already passed out from being so exhausted of grabbing people from the battlefield and bringing them back that they just dropped where they were and were passed out asleep. I made my way down to the ramparts, tried to heal who I could, but most everyone was too far gone by the time I got to them. But the biggest surprise was as I looked over towards that dragon, I finally got over to it. It was in a bad way. Multiple dozen ballista hits were all through its body. It had been bleeding all day. The bleeding just hadn't stopped. Though I couldn't tell if any of the actual arteries or any of the organs had been hit. You get perforated that much, you're just going to be a sieve, man. You're just going to be leaking all over the place. I looked over, and Terzak was right by the head, and she was crying. I thought she had been hit, so I ran over and asked her, "Where are you hit? Where are you hit?" as I started patting her down, trying to feel for wet blood. But it wasn't that she was hit. I said, "What's wrong?" Reniza came over, put her hand on my shoulder, and said, "Do you know who this is?" Who is? What are you talking about?" She motioned towards the dragon. "Do you know who this is?" No. Terzak finally turned and looked. "I thought I had lost him. He was gone." "Gone? Who the fuck are you talking about?" It turns out her grandfather's brother had disappeared years ago. Something had happened to him and he was just poof gone one day. They couldn't figure out what in the hell was going on. So they immediately started to search, but nobody could find him. They knew he wouldn't get up and leave. But why was he here? And second all, why the hell was he full dragon? This didn't make sense. I tried to ask what the hell was going on. I even turned to the dragon himself, but he simply growled. I didn't understand what he was saying, but Terzak began to cry even more. I turned over to Reniza. "Okay, explanation, tell me what the hell is going on." Apparently, they could understand what the hell he was saying. He was trying to say goodbye. He believed he was dying. I could understand that with the amount of blood that was leaving his body. I looked over and one of the ballista shots was right through his abdomen. I couldn't tell how deep, but this was bad. This was real bad. He was probably bleeding out bile into his internal intestines. It just was bad. Eventually, his blood would become toxic to itself. So I looked over at Terzak and said, "There might be something I can do." She looked at me, and with just the saddest look in her eyes. "But you don't have any power left." I looked at her, I looked at Reniza. Zena had actually come close, and so did Line. I looked over, and I could see Rena way off in the distance, and also Leaf. To protect those we care about, and to protect those who fight along our side, I will burn my own soul if I have to. That's what we do. And walking past Terex, I basically pushed her off to the side, placed my hands on the face of the dragon, looked him in the eye, and said, "This is probably going to hurt." He let out a sound which I would learn later was a laugh, as if he wasn't already in enough pain. With that, I began to look through his DNA to see what the hell happened to him, what was going on, why he was this way, and why he wasn't a half-dragon like the other two were. This didn't make a lick of sense. I began to go through, and it turns out he had been altered, but whoever did this did a very sloppy job. They had shoved all the humanoid DNA deep down into his cells, so much so that it was actually a little difficult to find. But once I opened it up, everything was there. It was like reading a textbook, boring and dry as you went through. But it was all there, everything I needed. But what I truly needed was power. Something I was very much lacking at that point. Not only that, but I hadn't slept in days, so I was pretty much running on empty. But you know what? It didn't matter. I thought about the girls. Thought about Keen. I thought about Sarah and her niece. I thought about all of them. And now it's time for me to make sure that they have as much back as what was taken from them when they were pulled into the shitty world. Focusing more, I started to lock DNA strands, going through the entire body itself. I could hear the dragon moaning in pain, and I knew this was going to hurt both of us. As I went through each of them, it was like straining a muscle even more and more in my own body. More and more, pushing the limits. It was like feeling the tendons start to crack and snap as they started pushing through. The pain radiating through my body could not be underestimated. I actually started crying a bit because tears were just rolling down my face. I didn't make a sound, not one. But inside, I was screaming as my soul just ripped itself apart doing what I had to do. Using life energy is something that most people don't understand. This is something you don't ever want to push, as it could quite easily burn out and kill you, or it can burn itself. There are many different ways of doing this, but I knew I had to push this beyond its absolute limits. So I pushed even farther, reaching out farther down the body all the way until I was told they could see a slight glow coming from the body. With that, as I focused, I could hear something in the background, but I didn't focus on it. Apparently, the new captain of the guard decided to show himself, and he wanted me to stop. But yeah, when you have two dragonkin that are more than willing to shove a lightning bolt up his pee hole, you might want to back off. And back off he did. He told his royal guard to watch over me, though, just in case I did something stupid. Well, needless to say, I was already doing something stupid. But I guess they want something absolutely insane. As I continued to work, the pain radiated from my muscles into my tendons, into my joints, into the bones, into my spine, up into my skull. I thought for sure I was going to drain every bit of life force, every bit of energy I had before everything was complete. But eventually, I felt a hand reach up. An almost clawed hand. Reach up and grab my forearm. And in a light voice that seemed to have many years on it, said, "That's enough." I slowly opened my eyes and looked and realized that I was still holding the face of a dragon. But now, it wasn't a full-blown dragon, no. Instead, It was a dragonkin. As I looked, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I had done it. I had actually done it. I had brought him back to what he was, and the look on his face, the smile that came across his face of sheer delight and enjoyment was worth it, as I completely lost consciousness and fell over. I woke up 3 days later, underneath a tree, with several of my own kind watching. I wondered what had happened, and I started jumping up, but I barely had any energy to move. They all told me they were worried about me, that they didn't know if I was going to make it. I asked what was going on, what about the battle? Apparently, they could barely make any headway. They were only able to take down the outer wall, but the inner wall was even more defended. They would be taking even more casualties. I went up to try and walk over to the MASH to see if I could help anybody out, but it was like a baby deer. Well, no, actually, baby deer had more stability than I did at that point, as I immediately fell on my face. Thankfully, several others picked me up. Line's cold hands definitely helped keep me in line, and she reached up and put her hand on my forehead, immediately cooling me down. My body had been overheating, trying to heal myself, and her nice, calm eyes helped me out. But I still had to get up. I looked over and I started reaching out and reaching out. All my training had kicked in. Started screaming, "Where is it? Where is it? Where is it? My weapon, where is it? Where is it?" Immediately, Renna reached out and put my rifle in my hand. I immediately grabbed it, looked it over, having complete and total control all of a sudden over my hand movements. I checked to make sure the safety was on, the magazine was in, and I did a quick press check. Yep, it's loaded. Okay, I'm back to reality. Okay, now, brief me on what the fuck just happened. Well, that's when they told me I was out for a few days. Along with that, several other things had happened. One, Shara had actually come up and tried to get a hold of me because some of the guards were trying to take liberties with some of the prisoners. This caused a lot of problems, and it wasn't until Shara herself grabbed the leader of the guards and actually asked him how much he would like to fall from orbit. He didn't understand orbit, but when she said it would take about 2 minutes for him to actually smash on the ground and go splat in front of everybody, well, he understood at that point, because she simply picked up a rock, teleported it about 200 or 300 feet in the air, and then just told him to wait. And as the rock slammed down about 10 feet away from him, he realized she wasn't kidding. I thanked her profusely for doing that, as I really did not want to have to deal with that type of bullshit. But as it turned out, the guards did not take too kindly to this, and all of them raised their swords. Shara worried that she would be taken advantage of, and then she reminded them who, quote-unquote, owned her. They then realized that they would have to deal with me. Well, that calmed them down quick. Shara, along with Leaf and Hana, decided to go over and make sure they were okay. As far as the battle went, again, it didn't actually move too well. The outer wall, once they had their shields up, they were quite literally pushing their way through, pushing everybody into the next round of turrets, and then using some sort of special ability to, well, take them all out in one shot. Or they would simply try to use some sort of gunpowder weapon. They did have black powder after all, but it was difficult and tenuous to use it at best. But you know what they say, if it's stupid but it works, it ain't stupid. I kind of grinned at that, as somebody had quoted that to me. I looked around. I actually saw Lee on one side. He was completely out of gas, on one knee, still holding that katana in his hand. I just asked him, "Why didn't you just heal yourself?" He looked at me and simply stated, "I don't have the power to do it." I reached up to try and heal him, but he just simply waved me off. telling me I didn't have the power either. I hate to say it, but he was right. I would need another full day before I was even close to ready. But as we talked, they brought over an older man. When I say older, I say older than the girls for certain. He was almost middle-aged, I would say, but definitely a dragonkin of some sort. The strange horns that came out of his head, the wings on his back, and that tail that was pretty obvious to see as he swung it way side to side as he walked. He came up and he immediately started thanking me. I wasn't even sure what the hell to call him. I was like, okay, you're welcome, but please stop squeezing me. You're gonna squeeze out a fart. He didn't understand what I meant, really, but I simply tried to push him away. Eventually, Terzek decided to remind him that I'm still human and that I could probably get squished if he wanted to. Eventually, he told me his name, and I'm sorry, but I just had to say, Zool, motherfucker, Zool! As his name quite literally was Zool. I have no idea how to spell that with 2 O's, 2 A's, a U, I don't know, some sort of weird symbol over the top like saying jalapeno. I have no clue. But he looked at me all sorts of strange for that one. Yet I needed some sort of joke. I needed to laugh. I was completely spent. Eventually, getting up on my feet and looking around, I could see that most of the battle lines had pretty much stabilized, but I still wondered why in the hell we were attacking a castle. Eventually, I found the new prince and asked him why. Why are we going after a castle? I thought this was an invasion. Why are we going after a castle? This is a static defense. What the shit? He simply looked at me and said, "You would not understand. Try me," I said. "It is beyond your level of intellect." "Say that again and I'm leaving." "So, that's strike 2. You got one more chance. Tell me why." He actually dismounted his horse to get in my face. "I am the prince, and you will follow my orders." Jeez, and I thought your brother was an asshole. With that, he tried to reach for his sword. I simply jumped on him, tossed him to the ground, and held my hand over his face. And then I immediately looked into his DNA and I changed a whole bunch of things. I made it so he couldn't use either arm. They just went limp. And then I simply stood up over him. "So, you want to try me again?" With that, to my surprise, Lee ran over and told me to fix him immediately. I asked why. "He's the prince. You really want to piss off the royal family even more?" "If he doesn't want to give me a straight answer, then yeah, I do." "You Americans," he said. "Oh, shut the fuck up. Maybe if you watch more anime, you would actually figure this out. He's playing us, aren't you?" As I looked down to him. He was still trying to use his arms. I simply grabbed him by the front of his armor as his guards came over, all of them looking very confused and very pissed. I raised him up, looked him in the eye, and said, "I'll fix you, but you're going to answer my fucking question." I then put my hand on his face again, fixed his arms real quick, and then pushed him back. "Now tell me, why are we assaulting a castle? And why the hell was he changed into a full-on dragon? What the shit is going on?" Then he finally relented. "I will explain, just not here. Follow me." I followed him off to the side. I waved for not only my folks, but he waved for his guards to back away so we could speak in private. "As it stands, you don't understand the politics of this world. Don't piss me off again. It was not meant as an insult. It is simply a reality. You have not been here long enough." "Then spell it out in simple terms." "Fine. There's many different species on this world. The majority of them are human, and humans are the dominant ones. We always fight better. We are always stronger. We are always better coordinated. We are just better than them all. But because of that, they decided that they would want to destroy us. They would want to subjugate us. So we decided to do it first. What? With that, he could see the intense hate I had in my eyes. Do not get this confused. They are lowly beast folk. They are not worth much at all, as they are only fit for physical labor or for personal use. With that, he let it set to me as he motioned a little bit towards those that were under me. I didn't have any heart to tell him that I would not take advantage of those girls ever. I've seen what happens in that type of society, and I want nothing to do with it at all. He continued, we discovered that inside that castle was a group of mages who had summoned others here, similar to the way we did with you, but when they did, they used it using a different type of method. Because of that, the human portion was subdued. As I could see, you have brought it back out on this one. However, they used it to raise the abilities of their own creatures. As you've seen with the orcs, goblins, and things of that nature, they are very strong, very quick. They tend to outfight the rest of us, which makes them a very strong threat. Along with that, we worry that they would take over and subjugate us. Hitting this point again did not help his own argument. I cut him off and simply asked, so can you tell throughout history who was the first one to fire the first shot? Fire the first shot? We did not have gunpowder back in those times, and it was before my time. In other words, you have no idea who started the conflict. Could it be just a fight over a female or something? Well, it's nothing of that. I doubt it. I mean, some of the females like the orcs because they are, larger, motioning his hands a little bit to show about a 3-foot long width between his palms. I didn't know this was true, but it kind of was funny, yet grossed me out at the same time, because, seriously, that would kill a human female. Regardless of that, he continued, but it is possible. There was rumors at one point of one of the elven women coming over and bedding with a human king, so that was possibly it, considering she was already a queen. Oh, great, we got Helena Troy here. Great, wow, okay. I backed away, just rubbing my head like, wow. I don't care where in the flying shit we are in the universe, the power of the pussy holds all the cards. Wow. He was looking at me strange as I came back to him. Could you explain this Helen of Troy? Well, let me put it to you very succinctly. You got a king whose wife cheated on him with another prince. She went over to the prince who had the more powerful, I don't want to say army, but had the most powerful city. So the one who got cheated on decided that, or betrayed, I should say, took all his armies and went in, after a long time of losing a whole bunch of his own people, was able to destroy that city. Over what? Over a cheating whore. Well, I wouldn't consider her a cheating whore. She was actually part of my bloodline. Whoa. Stop. Full stop. Back that truck up. Beep. You're trying to tell me that you are partly elf. Well, yes. Yes, I am. That is how I get such features as this. Yeah, probably why you're so fucking arrogant, too. Well, who's in charge of this castle? Is it elves, too, now? Is that what you're going at them? Oh, no, it's not elves at all. No, absolutely not. Well, then who? It is the Freys. The Freys, of course, the fairies. They're the ones that are taking over everything. Everyone knows that the Freys have a certain hypnotic effect on all. We worry about this hypnotic effect, as it would, I know, it would take you over, some such bullshit. But you know about it. Your consciousness would fight it. I've seen hypnosis. Hana does the same goddamn thing. So you're telling me losing all these people, calling us here, was because you were worried that somebody was going to cast a spell on you? Well, it's not quite that simple, but it's a yes or no question. Well, you know, there's more complexities to this. It's a yes or no question, yes or no. It's not as, in our own way of thinking, in our own truth, it's, oh, for the love of all that is holy. I simply walked away at that point, waving my hand, gesturing, I got no more time for this bullshit. With that, I walked over to everybody and said, okay, we're done here. We had seriously got to be done here. Can you get a hold of everybody? Give me Keen, give me Line, give me Hana, give me everybody. We're done. We're seriously fucking done with this bullshit. But I couldn't be done. The battle had started up again, and now there was even more wounded. And let's face it, I'm a healer. My job is to unstack the bodies. And that's what I was going to do. Though, as everyone came over, I told them what was going to happen. I said, we are going to find a way to make peace here so people stop killing each other. And also, I need everybody to make sure that the prisoners are not being mistreated. Remind those guards that if even one of them does something evil, nefarious, or in any way, shape, or form harmful to them, especially the females, I will make it my personal business to make them and the rest of their guards' life just suck. They actually asked me for what I would do specifically. Ask them if they want to be turned into women themselves. Can you do that? Rena asked me. I have no idea. But I just turned him into mostly human, so I wouldn't put it past what I can do. Besides, if you knew anything about healers, you would know that sister powers of healers is something that you never want to underestimate. Ever. With that, they immediately ran off to do what they needed to do. With that, none of them could find Keen. Apparently he was left behind towards the very far back in case he had to rebuild something. But we didn't have time to worry about that at the moment. I asked Reniza, Terzak, Zul, and anyone else who could get us inside if there was a possible way of them delivering a message. He said, yeah, there was. And Zul would do it himself as a way of thanking us. I pulled out anything I could and then realized I don't need parchment. I got my notebook and a pen. Hold on. I wrote down as fast as I could a message. A message to let them know that if they wanted this war to stop, they simply had to set a certain message on the center tower. The center tower, of course, being where the king resides. We needed to talk. With that, I signed it to be the Grand Healer and put my name on it. To my surprise, Zul took it, immediately flew up into the sky, made a beeline over top as he was coming in way, way higher than he had to, just a way to avoid the ballistic attacks, and then dropped down right on to where it was. I had to watch through binos. It was so far off, and I just see this tiny little dot landing and just standing there. And then a couple other little dots come out and surround him. Oh crap, I hope he doesn't get skewered. And then they all just went inside. I took that as a good sign. But what in the ever-loving shit? Oh. I didn't have time to worry about it as I still had wounded coming in. More wounded. I was starting to wonder if radar was going to yell choppers incoming wounded as I was just reaching my absolute limit. I had already pushed this body well beyond what it should. If it wasn't for the fact that I am a healer and that I would automatically heal myself, I'd be very much dead. I knew it. Everyone else knew it. As I was trying to patch them up using sutures and things like that. They all wondered why I wasn't using magic anymore, but I didn't have any left. All the other healers that had gotten rest were able to take care of everything, seal up the wounds completely after I was done. But it wasn't much we could do. Thankfully, the battle that day did not take place for very long, and we didn't have all that many casualties. Though as the sun finally set, I got a surprise. A welcome surprise. As Zul came back, flying directly over towards where I was, at least where he thought I was, landed and started looking for me. Thankfully, Leaf was there to make sure he knew where I was, as I really needed some sleep. I was just done. After healing up the last one, I'm just asleep up against a tree. Well, sort of. You see, Hana decided to use her coils to make a bed for me. Sweet girl, although I kind of wish she had adjusted her coils just a little bit, as my head was almost next to her crotch. Yes, for a snake girl, she has a crotch, for those who didn't figure that one out. Although it wasn't a very restful sleep, as I was immediately shook awake by Zul. He was getting cursed out by Hana for waking me up, but I simply wiped the sleep out of my eyes. What? I have it right here. What do you have it right here? What? Hold on. What? As I simply blinked several times, trying to get the sleep out of my eyes. He immediately put a parchment in front of me, and I opened it up. I'm grateful for that magic spell for making me able to read this, because I could tell in my half-asleep state that it was in a language I didn't understand. But as I looked, everything morphed into English. Oh, shit, okay. With that, okay, the prince wasn't lying. It's from a fray, all right. They call themselves pixies, and they want to stop this. Okay, I'm game. I just got to get myself inside. Thankfully, for them, that's going to be an easy one. I asked the prince specifically to give the army 2 days rest. The healers were completely spent, myself included, as the fact that I almost stumbled and fell on the way to go talk to him. The other healers didn't look too much better. They didn't have the magic capacity I did, and they looked shabby. The medics themselves were also complaining they didn't have any bandages left. They needed a resupply. And of course, after several days, almost a full week of fighting, the army was pretty goddamn tired. They needed a break. Thankfully, he may have been an arrogant asshole, but he wasn't that big of a dumbass. He was smart enough to say, okay, we will give everyone a break. I said, great. I'm going to go talk to our pixie queen over here, the fairy queen, or fairy king, or whatever the hell you want to call them. How dare you even think about doing that without my permission? Better to ask forgiveness than permission in this case. I'm going to go at first light tomorrow. For right now, I need to go lay down. And as I was walking back, I actually had to be picked up by Hana and carried over back to where I was sleeping before. She again curled up, but this time she moved a little bit, so my face wasn't right where, well, let's just say I don't want to be right there if she cracks one off. It might be bad. It might be really, really bad. Regardless of that fact, I waited until the next morning, and thankfully, I wouldn't be going alone. I had 3 dragonkin, Reniza, Zul, and Thurzak, that were going to fly in ahead of us to let them know that we were jumping in. Though it would take a lot of power, Shara and Xena would be able to jump me in both at the same time. I made sure Line, Meadow, Leaf, and all the rest were back with the other prisoners just to watch over them. Lee was asking me what the hell I was doing, and when I explained, he was surprised. When he went and verified what the hell was going on and why we were actually fighting, as he had been on the front line and saw several of his friends be destroyed, not only crushed, but sliced, decapitated, bled out on the ground before anybody could get to him. He was done with this battle. He was done watching people he had trained with and grown to care about dying in front of him. So if there was a peaceful way, he was willing to do so. And at one point I thought for certain he was going to draw that sword and do that lightning slash draw shit that he does. Whatever. I didn't have time to worry about it. As I looked through the binoculars, had my gear on, everything except my pack, of course. I would bring my rifle, but that was just to show them who I was and to prove it. I saw the 3 sets of wings land. I saw guards come out. I saw them simply move off to the side. All right, girls. That's our cue. As I dropped the binoculars back onto my pack. Within barely a moment, the next thing I realized, that we had dropped maybe a quarter of an inch, landing on our feet, on the balcony. Though facing the wrong way, we had arrived.